Alright everyone, we're going to be doing now part 4. That means continuing with the blending, maybe doing a certain amount of darkening or diluting, and getting into the details, and then finally the final details and highlights. And those kinds of information you want to do very meticulously, but you want to save them to the end of your drawing, especially if you're still layering information down and blending. Okay, so I am going to start with, let's see, I think I'll start with the bottles, and what I'm going to do is some blending, darkening, putting in highlights. So let's start with the blending portion. All I'm doing is I'm kind of pressing the charcoal more into the surface of the paper so that it holds it. Because right now a lot of the charcoal that I've added on is just resting on top of the surface. So now I want to kind of push it into the texture of the paper and per se impregnate it with that information. So while I'm doing this, I'll also do a certain amount of attention to the details, as well as diluting and darkening, blending. So as I start to break up some of these areas, I think this is the part of the charcoal drawing that I really enjoy. So up to this point, a lot of the stuff is, to me, just sort of more busy work. But once you've got your information laid in, you can actually now start to model and sculpt, per se, all these particular areas. But it really challenges, I think, your perception, or what you're looking at and what you're creating as you're plugging along. So you really have to pay attention. Your look, then making the mark, adjusting a shape, adjusting the value. Really looking at, especially on objects like glass or metal, they have a real reflective quality. So what's being reflected in the glass and the kinds of amorphic shapes, or how they kind of break up the shapes that are being reflected in them, they certainly do not make them look like the object that it's reflecting. It kind of makes them look like they're on an acid trip. They're all sort of melted and amoebic. You notice that I'm kind of following the contour of the bottle as I blend, and that helps retain its shape as opposed to going straight up and down and left and right. But basically drawing what I see and then how that shows up here in the reflected areas. So as I deal with these specific areas, again, I want to stress that you really want to not generalize this information. Draw what you see, record it. If there's an area that gives you trouble, what's great about charcoal is it's pretty forgiving. You can actually go back and fix an area. And so you're wondering, well, how the heck do I fix an area? Well, let's say I don't like this right here. What I can do is I can take a piece of paper towel, I can wipe out that information, I can take my eraser, pull the lighter area back out in the shape that it's occurring. So I'm looking, in a sense I'm almost drawing with the eraser, and then I can take my charcoal pencil, I can soften the edge of that erased area just by laying just a little bit of charcoal on its periphery, and then I take my finger and I blur that edge just a little bit more so it doesn't look so flat and shapely, in a sense like it's been stuck on there like a decal. So by softening the edge, it makes it look like it's more part of the bottle as opposed to stuck on top of the bottle. Okay. Alright. I'm going to back burner that bottle for a while. I'm going to come here onto this bottle. I'm going to pull off a little bit of this charcoal on top by using the paper towel. So the paper towel has the ability to dilute an area by picking up the charcoal. So see how it picks it up? There we go. So right here there's a dark shape being caused by this as a reflection, and it extends kind of weirdly this way, and this part right here is actually that. It's kind of an interesting shape. Alright, and there's a really strong highlight right here. So I'm going to deal with the dark shapes that are around it. And in doing so, I can help kind of create the variety of value that is actually going on inside of the bottle. Over here I can see the bottom of the bottle through the sidewall, and it's significantly darker. But through the highlight it's not as dark, so I won't go as heavy-handed. And then inside this one I'll make it heavy again, and then it's light again and it goes heavy. And by doing that, you can create the illusion that this bottle has a transparency quality to it. Even though it's the dark brown glass, I can still see a certain transparent nature that it offers to give the effect that I can see the bottom of the bottle through the wall of the glass bottle. Alright. Alright, so blend this area in. I'm going to soften this edge. Kind of break up between the two highlights. right here, the grayness or the lightness of the newsprint paper is actually reflecting light up to here, giving it a bit of an illumination. So I won't do any more value here, and I actually will come back a little bit later with my eraser and kind of lighten this area. Okay, I'm going to back burner that area and come into the neck. Here. Alright, so right here is the information for the cork or the stopper. So here's the grommet. And I don't want to use the pencil to outline this, okay? Because remember, I don't want to use lines. So what I'm going to do is, to show the cork, I'm going to use the blending stick, and I'm going to draw with that. So come in real lightly. So this is the top of the stopper. It has a slight value to it. There's that. And here's the top side of the stopper. And then here's the bottom side of the stopper. So they both have just a hint of shadows there to show that. And then here's the bottom of the stopper. And because there's this value at here, I'm just going to make that more apparent. But I'm going to have it stop up against the stopper. So by doing that, this value meets this value. I don't have to reinforce it with a line. Just like that. Alright, so that makes the stopper more apparent. And then I can come in with my retractable eraser, and I have a certain amount of hardware that holds the stopper to the bottle. It's one of those pop tops, like a Grolsch bottle. And then have the hardware come down into the stopper. Looks kind of like a, sort of a cursive letter. And then I come around and kind of just tune up the edges just a little bit with my pencil, but not heavily outlining it. Although a lot of you are going to want to heavily outline stuff. So resist the temptation of doing that. Because again, if you heavily outline it, it will cartoonerize it, and it will lose its photorealness, which you've spent so much time trying to achieve. Alright. So the hardware actually penetrates into the side of the bottle, so it stays fast. And does this little curlicue, and then a band comes down and goes inside to the actual stopper, and it comes out the other side, attaches to the other side of the bottle. There's just a little bit of a hint of that side, and that one is slightly in shadow. There we go. Alright, I'll continue around on the glass. Kind of retain my highlight streak. So I'm kind of using the blending stump to massage or model the surface as I kind of sculpt and move around the charcoal material, getting it to obey my bidding. That's a good way to term it. All right. Let's see. What do I want to do? I'm going to lighten this side just a little bit because it's, again, I'm getting that reflection from the table. I'll lighten that up using the paper towel to pick up the charcoal and lighten it. Now, while at the same time it's lightening it or diluting it, it's also blending it. There we go. All right. Again, be careful that you're not inclined to outline information. So if you feel like you need to put a line there, what you can do is see how I'm just kind of going around that line. Now here's something to consider. These drawings look pretty amazing. They look a lot different from a distance. Up close, especially you as the artist who makes it, will find a lot of times that they look like shit. And I hate to say it that way, but it's true. So one of the things you can do is just remind yourself that, again, these are to be seen from a distance. Usually they're on the wall, framed, and they're not intimate and close like a magazine or a book. So just remember that as you're looking at this. And again, you're going to be your own hardest critic when it comes to this kind of drawing. Because you're so close to it for so long, a lot of times it's really easy to say, or self-sabotage and say, boy, this really looks terrible. What was I thinking? I should have taken the underwater basket weaving course instead of this. So I just want to warn you that that's going to be the case, and that's what you're going to run into. All right. Kind of lighten the opening of the bottle just a little bit. All right, I'm tired of this bottle right now. I'm going to go back now over to the mug. And let's see, what can we work on? Let's go over here into the hinging for the cover or the cap. Alright, I'm going to pull out these lighter areas that I neglected earlier. Now you can lighten with this tool, and all you're doing is back and forth strokes, but you got to do them really close and then overlap them. If you do them too far apart, what you get is like linear reductive marks, and they have a cartoony effect that isn't necessarily always very pleasing. So fair warning, just make sure that when you're using this as a lightening tool that you overlap your back and forth strokes so that you don't get those linear marks. Alright, I'm just kind of coming out on the periphery and tuning up its shape using this. So the retractable eraser here, it's a great sort of drawing tool in the sense that if you want to lay in a diluting sort of mentality here where you're making stuff lighter, this is a great tool that can be, for the most part, great for details, but you can also work rather large areas. It's just you have to spend just a hint more time overlapping marks and kind of putting them together. The other reason that I find it easier to work with is because it's ergonomically, it's like a pencil, so it's easy to work. I have quite a familiarity with holding a pencil and then conducting the business end, you know, to do my bidding. Alright, I'm going to come back in here and pump up some value. There's a lot going in and around this lid. I almost wish I didn't pick this object now, but I'm doing it. So it goes. Something gets too dark too quickly, you can use your finger just to, I'm just touching it and just kind of moving it around. It kind of calms that blackness down a little bit. Alright, I'm going to quit on that for now. That's another thing that you're going to be learning as you're doing this kind of drawing is when to say when, okay? Not to sound like a dare ad or anything like that, but you just have to at some point stop, otherwise it's really easy to overwork an area, and the typical outcome of an overworked area is it becomes very muddy, and it gets to a point where it looks just like a horror of a mess, and it doesn't, the results that you're trying to attain just aren't happening anymore. Even though you keep going back and trying again, it just gets to a point where it just gets too muddy. Alright, I'm going to start putting in this pattern. It's kind of more of a detail effect, but I believe that looking at my still life, looking at my drawing, the local value or the color of this particular object in black and white, even referencing my photo here, it's a pretty light object, and then the pattern on it is very dark, so it's like that contrast of dark and lights. But I feel that overall right now the mug has enough shadow on the side here to promote over here. Again, in this photo, to remind you, I used a flash by accident. And then in here, it's looking really nice and dark. So I'm going to put in this pattern. Using the charcoal pencil. Because the pattern is pretty small in terms of as a detail, the pencil just makes more sense to lay that pattern in as opposed to coming in with my stick. It really doesn't make any sense. I mean, I guess I could use the corner, but I just don't have the kind of control that I'm looking for with the tip of this pencil that it offers. Alright, there's like a band. So you want to use that shield. So I've been smudging this inadvertently without even knowing it. So oh well, I'll sleep tonight. Always come back and fix it. that detail. Down here is another band. Right here. There we go. Oh, and then I have these teardrops. Know that this must be amazing to watch me do this. So entertaining, so fun. As the teardrops round out of sight, they get more and more narrow, a little bit more obscured. Alright, so there's that. I extend these down just a hint. Go. And then the bottom band with the scallop pattern. Alright, so there's that. I'm going to leave that for now. I'm going to come in here and make this just a hint darker. There's like a rim inside the mug when it was made. There's like a ridge in here. I'm going to show that. Alright, down here, there's just the bottom of the mug is rounded as it goes into the bottom of it. So there's just an ever so slight shadow along the rim of the mug. So instead of making a hardcore outline, what I'm going to be doing is making just little feathering lines that are slightly like half moons, if that makes visual sense. I know a lot of you used to chisel a lot in the class. It's kind of like a chiseled line so that it's broken up. And the reason for that is because you don't want that strong outline, but you want to show that there's a division between the ground and the actual object. So by making that chiseled line, then you can take your blending stump and you go just a little bit higher and you stroke into that chiseled line, and it gives you a better transition between the two. But then I can show that the rounding starts up here, because on the mug there's just an ever so slight mark from when they had it on the ceramic turning wheel. So this helps create that 3-dimension that's happening there on the mug on that particular side. Alright, then around that there's just an ever so slightly area that's catching just a slight highlight. So I can put that in. Alright, I got that shadow right here. I'm just going to dip this in some dark area and use that to draw on the cast shadow on the handle, and then I'm going to blur it out. There we go. And then the cast shadow underneath the underside of the handle, but it's not as dark as the blue when converted to the black and white. There we go. Fantastic. All right. I'm just going to use my finger to blur up against my object, but you can see the value is slightly different between the ground and the object. Alrighty, there's the mug. Alright, I'm going to come back over to the bottle. Alright, let's see. The stopper for this bottle is right here. So I'm going to use my eraser, the pink one, to pull that out. Just like that. And then I'm going to come right around the side of it with this blending stump and give it some perspective. So it has a slight shadow on top because the light's coming from this way, not this way. So there's a bit of a shadow on top. And then the shadow is more on the left side than the right. And I want to enlighten this area just a little bit more. Come in and do the hardware. Okay. And then where the hardware goes into the bottle, which is about here, it's sort of a rounded piece of glass that protrudes just a hint. So I'm going to use the pencil to make the rounded shape. And then I'm going to take this eraser and then run this side of it just a little bit. This is what I'm seeing on the side of the bottle. And that helps that area just kind of go pops. Pops it forward. And as this ring rounds out to the back side, there's a slight shadow here. You put that in. Top of the bottle. So if you're wondering how to clean your eraser, it gets pretty dirty, you can just wipe it on your shorts or jeans, whatever you're wearing. See how it cleans it up pretty quick? So just rubbing it on sort of any kind of fabric. But jeans work the best. Alright, now I'm going to come in and improve my highlight areas. So you've noticed that I'm kind of bouncing around from object to object. Personally for me, I don't like to work each object to its fullest. I like to kind of do mine in steps, and I like to give those steps to each of my objects in line. And then once I've achieved all that, then I come back and I do the next step. So that's just kind of how I learned how to tackle these particular kinds of drawings. It's not the right way, it may not be the best way, but since that's the way I learned it and the way that I've been doing it, it works really well for me, and I've stuck to it. But it gives me an opportunity when I see each of these working at the same level, I can move on to the next level and they're all kind of going together. Sometimes I think what I've discovered is if one thing is so highly detailed and refined and done, and then when I do the rest, I'm kind of exhausted, and I just sort of almost not give up, but I don't want to give it that same quality, and then the drawing suffers for it. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's the way that my brain kind of justifies it. Not that it necessarily needs justification, but maybe it's more of an explanation. Alright, so again, I'm just going in. This is kind of now doing more details, working on the highlights or the high contrasts that's going on in this bottle, whether it's reflections from the light sources or the reflection of the other objects in the still life that are being reflected on the bottle's surface. Alright. Tuning up the edge of this. There we go. Oh, that's nice. Alright, let's go back over to this. I have a really strong highlight now that's kind of broken up here. Those two. Yeah, I'm looking again, putting in the highlight. Some of the highlights aren't as strong as others, so just be careful that you don't give them the same equality. Really look at it, make a decision on how bright it is, and that will determine how hard or how much pressure you exert on the eraser as you do it. Hardware. There we go. Gorgeous. Alright, so I still have a lot of this raw stuff here, so I'm going to blend that in back into the bottle's surface. And what that'll do is it'll bring the bottle now more in the direction of being, or having the appearance that it's a smooth surfaced object. And we all know that glass bottles have a smooth surface, visually as well as tactilely. So you probably noticed that there's a lot of going back and forth, going over stuff, pulling stuff out, putting stuff back in. But just being conscious of that and knowing that, your drawing will turn out a lot more successful. And it won't seem like such a burden or difficulty, or where you may feel that you get stuck. This is the cast shadow underneath the bottle that's really strong. Blend that out. By putting this in, it will really make this part of the bottle pop. That just goes there. Bring the cast shadow out a little bit farther so it blends and it fades. Go. Let's see, I got this one under here, and you'll notice that a lot of this stuff got obliterated earlier. So now I'm just coming back in, and since I have stuff established here, I can reincorporate and put it back in. Go. Alright, that's it for the bottle now. I've been putting it off to the end, but where the wall meets the ground. So down here, making that transition from wall to ground. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to lightly put in using the side of my pencil, a rough line, and then I'm going to bring the line up and away from the edge. And visually what that will do is it will help the darker wall separate more cleanly from the lighter ground. So as I move this charcoal information up away from the edge, I use less pressure. And then knowing that my paper towel will do a certain amount of lifting, but blending at the same time, I'm just going to move that information up away from the edge. Try not to hit the edge, because what you're trying to do is make a clean edge. Alright, so all of a sudden now these two separate really nice. I'm going to improve upon that with the eraser. I'm going to dilute that. So now it's even cleaner. Over here, I'm going to do the same thing. It's just a simple triangle. Actually, I'll use my retractable because it'll get in there tighter than the pink. I'm not pressing hard, I'm just almost just like kind of dragging, stroking it. There we go, so there's that. Alright, then I'm going to come over here, make that sideline, lay in the value into the shadow, and then move it up. And then it's pretty tight area, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap my pencil with the paper towel, and I can get in there just a little bit more easier in a more detail like manner. There we go. Oh, it's gorgeous. Gorgeous. Alright, we'll go over here. Running out of charcoal pencils. So this is separating the ground from the background. And again, in my still life setup, I've cut two sides of the box off as well as the top, and then placed it behind my objects. And what it does is it creates a corner, but one side is more in illumination and the other one is more in shadow. So what that does is it helps by having these dark, this dark, and these dark, those work together. But by making this object light and this light, that works together. You can kind of think of it as good and evil, you know, however you want to look at it. And then these dark objects, their shadows are cast onto the light wall, which makes it pretty dramatic, but it's still light enough that this object still pops forward. The overlap creates a sense of depth of perception, or depth of space, as well as a feeling of perspective. Alright, again, I'm going to use my paper towel to blend that. Great. So a lot more cleaner transition between the two, but no heavy outline. Alright. The next thing I wanted to do was show you, this is one of those last steps. So here I have the white charcoal pencil, and probably the whole semester you're thinking, well, what the hell are we going to use this for? I'm glad you asked that. So you notice the white of the paper here. If I take this white charcoal pencil and actually lay it there, it just stands out a little bit more whiter than the paper. So visually, in areas that are really light, you can use the white charcoal. And so they're extremely great for making highlights in areas. Now this is a last thing. You don't want to blend this at all. This is a last touch. I can come into my bottle and you'll notice that the white is way different. So what I'm going to do is I'm using this white pencil to go in the center of my highlight that I erased out. So the center is the white charcoal, but on the sides of it is the white of the paper that's stained with charcoal, and then it goes into the dark. So what you do is you inadvertently create this gradation with the white charcoal, by drawing just in the center of your highlights. And it gives that highlight just that much more energy. And even just doing it on its own, like in this black field where I do have a strong highlight there, and I got these really tiny ones here, it makes them really stand out. So I feel that the charcoal pencil really outshines the white of the paper and works to your advantage to really promote and push those highlights. So even though this area is in highlight, as soon as I put that white down, the highlight in specific areas becomes that much more stronger. And so as a technique, it's really nice. Now you can also use it with light pressure so that it has kind of a grayness, and you notice that it's different in value. And you can use that as well to your advantage. So it's a great tool. I'm going to use it to promote the stopper a little bit more, to make it pop, so all of a sudden now it's a lot more visible. I'm going to do the same thing down here with this guy. Put the highlight on the metal of the hardware, just in certain places as I'm looking. There's one right there. There. Okay, so on the underside of this bottle, it's reflecting up from the white of the paper. So what I can do is I'll ever so lightly, using back and forth strokes, go over this information. And what I'm doing is I'm creating the illusion that the white of the paper is reflecting on the underside of this bottle in these specific areas. Giving it that much more of a photoreal likeness. Let's see, right here. Okay. Again, you don't want to blend this stuff. As soon as you blend the white charcoal into these areas, it becomes a really peculiar sort of muddy gray that's really hard to come back from. So if you feel like, right here on purpose, I'm making these really sort of strange lines, what you can do is find a clean finger and then just push it. Just like that. But you don't want to go any farther, but you see the kind of gray that I'm getting right here will start to muddy it up right there. Alright. Hit the rim. There. All I'm doing right now is just seeking out, searching for highlights, where they're at, putting them in. And you just kind of see how everything starts just popping. So this is putting the bling on everything. Okay. All right. At this juncture, the only place I'm still unhappy with is this background. Okay. So to fix it, I would pull the drawing off, take it outside, pour fuel on it, and set it on fire. I'm joking. Won't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a dirty paper towel and I'm going to start working the background. I want to use more of a circular approach so that it's more uniform. I'm going to go into these cast shadows, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of borrowing some of their value, and by doing that I can make the background just a little bit more polished, per se, looking cleaner, even though it's not. But I can get rid of the current marks that for me are visually just an eyesore. It's weird, I usually listen to music drawing, and it's weird to just draw without music. But most of you don't like my music, so you're welcome. We're not listening to my music. Alright, it's getting there. I'll rob some of this up a little bit more. Wow, that's looking much better. Much better. Almost gives it just a hint more drama as well because of the tone that I've added. So, at this point, I could keep going, but I'm going to call it. Again, these are really great once you put them on the wall. Walk away from them, look at them from a distance. You'll notice that they look extremely different than at this drawing distance. Okay, so I beg you, at some point, just get away from your drawing, lean it up against the wall, and get some space from it and you can see it. So at this point, you would carefully take your drawing outside, bang it on the ground to knock all the dust off. Make any final sort of, I don't know, erasures or anything like that. Like I have a lot of smudging here from the palm of my hand, so I would erase that and kind of clean that up. Then once everything is looking really good, cleaned up, everything's polished, final details, you would then want to spray this drawing. You're going to want to spray the drawing at about 10 to 12 inches, and you'll just do sweeping passes about this fast, and you want to overlap your passes. Again, you want to do this outside. You can use the fixative, workable fixative spray, which is at Michael's. Blick is actually still closed right now. Or you can use cheap aerosol hairspray. The downside of hairspray is it has a tendency to yellow the paper. It's because of some of the ingredients that are in spray, hairspray. So that's the only downside of not using hairspray. And depending on the brand, some will be more yellowing than others. Okay? So that concludes part 4 of blending and details and other sort of marks. to conclude this charcoal drawing.